This week it's been 5 years since Lehman Brothers collapsed. Larry, you worked for Lehman Brothers and you still work in finance. Has the culture on Wall Street really changed in a significant way?
The culture on the trading level, the average trader, I've been on the lecture tour, I've done 65 speeches in 16 countries, I get that every time. The average trader, I worked with a trader at Lehman that had $2 billion of tradable balance sheet, that's what we call it, like chips that you can throw around and trade, buy bonds, sell, buy stocks and things like that. Now he's at another firm, has $20 million. So 2 billion to 20 million. So by definition, the culture's changed on the ground level. The average trader has much less capital because there's just tremendous deleveraging in the US financial system. But every financial crisis metamorphosizes into another serpent, another beast. And I see around Asia, you're starting to see this lack of transparency of risk. And I think capitalism cannot work without transparency of risk. It's the main message of my book. If you can't see the risks in Lehman or the risks in some bank, then you can't make a sound judgment as to whether you should give that bank some money. Mm-hmm. And now in Asia, you just have a tremendous amount of banks over there that have it's kind of toxic assets. The same things that I saw in 2007 in the United States, I'm seeing in Asia today. And I think overall the culture is different in the United States, but I'm seeing some of the risk-taking culture expand throughout the Asian regions.
I think that, if I may, the risk-taking culture on Wall Street may have changed in terms of the scale. But certainly we see derivatives are still out of control. The Volcker rule still has not been put into effect. Dodd-Frank, only 40% of Dodd-Frank has been put into effect. Why? Because Wall Street and Wall Street lobbyists continue to put extraordinary pressure to slow down any kind of financial reform because they don't want any financial reform because that means they don't make as much money. And until we actually resurrect the Glass-Steagall Act, and I think we've got to break up the big banks and limit and cap the size of the big banks. Otherwise, we're going to have another too big to fail.
The whole Glass-Steagall Act comes down to transparency. Back in the 70s, you remember when you walked in Chase Bank or any bank, these banks didn't have 21st century financial products, derivatives, CDOs, synthetics products. Those products didn't exist in banks, and therefore when people put their money in them, then they could make a sound decision. But today the banks globally are still black boxes. So that's the big problem, is 5 years after Lehman, what have we solved there? Not much, and it puts us all at risk.
And Mark, what do you think? What do you think is the healthy relationship between Wall Street and Main Street?
Well, you know, people within Occupy Wall Street had different opinions, right? There was a range of perspectives. But as I demonstrate in my book, Translating Anarchy, if you talk to people that actually were most active in organizing the movement, most of those people weren't so much interested in occupying Wall Street as ending Wall Street. I mean, there's a sense that Wall Street is inherently this money machine that doesn't really care about the environment, that doesn't really care about how people are doing halfway around the world. And so, sure, you know, Wall Street can become more transparent and we can avoid the risk of another financial crisis, but I don't really imagine that most of the people who are trading these imaginary derivatives and papers and so forth really care how much people are getting paid in Cambodia when they're making you know, people's clothing. And so the human question is missing.
Well, I don't think you can separate, Mark, the human question from the financial question. And the problem is we have tried to separate the two. Our business press covers Wall Street as if it's one big, again, betting parlor. But in fact, there are people who are living in certain ways as a result of what Wall Street has done. A lot of people are underwater still with their homes. A lot of Americans are still in a point where they've lost their savings. You know, a lot of people who are facing retirement look upon the Wall Street bailout and say, well, why did they get bailed out? When in fact, you know, I'm still here. Everybody else is getting bailed out, but I am actually bearing the full brunt of this. There are human beings in this economy who are being overlooked.